What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another year of the most mediocre content you've ever seen in your whole life. I'm here for another year. I know that you guys probably thought you've seen the last of me, but I am here to stay in 2019, okay? I'm sure that you've all seen about 50 favorite books of the year videos, along with like 50 worst books of the year. And at first I didn't think I was gonna actually make this video because I didn't have enough books to talk about. I feel like it can be really easy to be like, here are my top 10 favorites of the year, but I don't have top 10 favorites. As I did the math and I took out the rereads that I had this year and other stuff, I realized that there were 10 books as a whole that I read. So I thought it'd be really interesting to just go through that list of 10 books, put those 10 books into a new order of least favorite to favorite, and then I thought it'd be cool to like go from my least favorite and then work up to my favorite. This is excluding a lot of rereads that I had this year, so I did like reread the first 3 books of Harry Potter. I reread the Shatter Me series. I think I reread another book, I don't remember. Those aren't gonna be included in here, mostly because ain't nobody got time for that. So I'm just gonna hop right into it, and we're just gonna go from the least favorite book of the year, and then we're gonna slowly work up to the better and the better and to the better until we're at the best, okay? I know that everybody else ever has made this video already and I'm like 2 weeks late, but you know what? I'm 2 weeks late to a lot of things, so I just feel like it's on brand. Anyways, let's start with the worst books of the year. I don't think that my least favorite book is gonna be much of a surprise to people. Maybe it's because, yeah, it's just a really bad book. Which one's it gonna be? My worst book of the year is Handbook for Mortals. I read this book in like August, September. Honestly, that little like section of 2 months after summer had ended is like a blur in my mind. I literally don't even remember anything that happened at that point. I should probably work on that, but I read this book and it was for a video and it was like not that great. I feel like any sort of media has this weird scale of like great, and then it goes over to bad, and then even further past the bad is like so bad that it's good. So like you want to say it's a good book because it was so enjoyably terrible. That's what this book was. I am waiting for the sequel. Like I am a stan. Like yeah, it's my least favorite book of the year, but like it was so enjoyably terrible that like I want to read the sequel. This book ended with like the biggest cliffhanger ever. She literally said, and they lived happily ever ... or do they? And I'm waiting to know if they do. When are we getting the sequel? Like I will read that book. I feel like that book wasn't much of a surprise, so we're gonna move on. The next book is another book that I did a review for, and this is a book that I never bought. I got it from my library, so I did not have to pay. Thank you, Lord. And I'm sure that you know what this book is too, because I've talked about it very, very frequently, and I did make a video about it. And that's Ugly Love by Colleen Hoover. Good stuff, wow. I have a really, really long video discussing all of my thoughts on this book, so I don't really want to detail much of it here, but it was just not great. The relationships in that book were rough. Is like an understatement. The main female character had no backbone and allowed every male character to just kind of walk all over her and treat her like garbage, and the guy character was treating the girl like crap and thinking he could get away with it and that it was fine, and it just made me feel really, really uncomfortable. There were like a lot of really borderline abusive scenes or just really, really toxic, subtle things. It just was really not that great, but I think y'all knew that. The next least favorite book of the year is another book that I made a video about. I just feel like there's a recurring thing is whenever I decide to read a book for a video, it's never that great. But I no longer own a physical copy of this book because fun fact about me is last year I unhauled like 200 books. Unfortunately, this book was one of them, and that was Zenith by Sasha Alsberg and Lindsay Cummings. I feel like I have like a weird relationship with this book, mostly because like I really wanted to love it, and I really didn't love it. I think the biggest problem that I had with it personally is that it just was a letdown. Like it easily could have been edited a lot more, and I obviously don't know what happened behind the scenes, whether the authors were just like, we don't need to edit it, it's fine, or if the editor was just not giving them the proper advice. Like I don't know what happened. I just feel like a couple more passes of editing or maybe some more structure things or character things, like it easily could have made that book like a 3-4 star book for me. It could have been a really, really enjoyable book, and and I really genuinely hope that book 2 is better received and that more people enjoy that book. So that's why this book isn't like the last book on this list. Like I feel like Handbook for Mortals was really bad and Ugly Love was also really bad. But I feel like Zenith, the more I think about it, I honestly think it's like a 2-star book. Now that I've had like a year to sit on it, I feel like this book had so much opportunity, and there were some scenes where I was reading it and I was genuinely like, okay, this is kind of good, but then it would get a little weird. So I feel like that's obviously not a good thing for a book. Like it didn't flow very well for me in my head. Maybe that was just me. But I do remember reading the last like 50 to 100 pages of that book and like being really actually hooked by what was happening, and like there's a big twist at the end, and I think because it had a lot of missed opportunities and it was a little bit awkward with some of the wording and some of the writing, it wasn't one of my favorite books, and I genuinely hope that book 2 is received better. Up next we have another book that I talked pretty extensively about me not being a big fan of. I gave this book like a 2.5 stars. It was just pretty mediocre. Which I feel like is just kind of the definition of what this book was. And that is A Court of Frost and Starlight by Sarah J. Maas. If you don't know, this book is a 200-page novella about Feyre and the gang after the events of the 3rd book, ACOWAR. I wasn't really sure what was going to go on in this book, and nothing went on in this book. It was like nice to be with the characters, and there were some like silly moments and moments where I was having a good time, but besides that, this book was just not that great to me. It felt like all the scenes weren't leading to anything important. It felt like I was having a hard time making it through each chapter. I felt like the wording was weird. There were some really uncomfortable scenes, and it just wasn't great. So it was only 2.5. It just was nothing. It didn't need to exist. So that was that. And I don't know if I'm gonna read the next half of the series. I really genuinely liked the first 3, but I just don't know. Pray for me. We've kind of ended off the books I didn't like list, so now we're gonna be moving over towards like the books that I kinda liked, or that were more like meh to me. And there's only 2 of those. This was only like a 2.5-star book, 3-star book, and that's Leah on the Offbeat by Becky Albertalli. I wasn't a huge fan of Simon versus the Homo Sapiens Agenda. Like, it was a book and it was good, but it was kind of one of those books where I read it and I was like, that was good, and kind of just moved on from it. And so this book was coming out and I was like, hey, I could go for a contemporary, and I know I could read it really quick, it's not that long, but it just wasn't the best. But like, I don't have any like harsh feelings towards it. It wasn't like I didn't like anything or like had a really hard time getting through it. Like, I had a really easy time going through it, but it just felt like the plot was really underwhelming, and it felt like nothing significant really happened. It felt like all the conflicts weren't conflicts. The characters never really grew. There was never like a moment where I was like, oh, this book happened because these characters grew in the end and because they developed. It kind of just felt like, instead of it being like an actual thing where we're moving, it felt like all the characters were on pause from when we had last seen them. I feel like the love interest, which is a spoiler, I feel like they just didn't have that much chemistry. I didn't see them as a good pairing, and it just felt kind of awkward and really forced. And I think because of that, it was just a meh book. I feel like it could have been done a lot better, but it wasn't that great to me. So it was only like a 3 stars. Moving on. The next book is another book that I gave 3 stars, but this isn't a book that I like have bad feelings towards. It was just kind of not my favorite, which is weird. I feel like I want to reread it. And that is A Very Large Expanse of Sea by Tahara Mafe. I had read this book back in like September, and I got an arc of it and I was pretty excited, and I really liked the main character and her struggles and her inner thoughts and just her whole story. I genuinely really liked it. I liked most of the characters and all of that, but I don't know what it was, but I just had a hard time loving this book, and I don't really know what it was. Like, it was a very powerful story. Contemporary normally isn't my thing, so maybe that's what it is. Maybe it just was like not super exciting to me. I wasn't a big fan of like the last half of the book. A lot of the conflicts near the end weren't very exciting. Some of them were a bit cliche. It felt like it could have been done in a better way. Like, the writing was good, obviously. I love Tahara Mafe's writing. Her characters were really nice in this book, but some of the plot points weren't my favorite, so that ultimately led me to taking like 2 stars off. Like, when I think of it, I have good feelings. I don't have any ill feelings towards it, but it still had issues. You know what I'm saying? But I still really recommend this book. It was really good. Now we are moving into the books that I liked. These are ranging from like 4 stars and then up to 5 stars. And I only have 4 left, so cool. This next book was only a 4-star book. Angels and Demons by Dan Brown. My boy Dan Brown. Ooh, look who it is. I read this back in the summer. I loved the first like 400 pages of this book. I was hooked. I loved what was going on. I liked the characters and the conflicts, and it like was so vivid in my mind. But then we got to the end and that's when things started to get really weird. Like normally I feel like the ending, like when everything was resolved, you're like, nice, finally. But when I finished this book, I felt more upset than anything. I was like, I don't understand what just happened. Like there were so many weird twists that happened or weird revelations about the conflicts that I was just not a fan of. Like there were just some weird decisions that were made and I just did not like it. Like I still liked the characters and I liked the plot, but like I feel like I got to the last like 100 pages of this book and I was like, I don't know who these characters are. I don't know what happened. Like it feels like I read the first 400 pages and I was like, nice, I love this. This is gonna be a 5 stars. And then it feels like the last 100 pages were like fanfic of what would have happened. It was just weird. It felt like the ending did not feel like a part of what the rest of the story was about. It was just not my favorite. I tried to watch listen y'all, I tried to watch the movie. It was so bad. Like I finished the book and then like the next day I was like, I'm gonna watch this movie. I got like 20 minutes in and I was so annoyed. Not even annoyed that like they had changed a lot of things. Like I can deal with that. But like I don't know what it was, but the acting and the script and just everything that was going on, I was furious. It was just a terrible, terrible film. I want to pick up the Da Vinci Code this year. We'll see how that goes. This next book, I feel like is gonna be a surprise to a lot of people because I feel like most people are gonna expect this to be #1 because the last like 2-3 years this series and this author has been #1. And that is Queen of Air and Darkness by Cassandra Clare. But I had a lot of issues with this book, and at first they weren't issues that were gonna take away from my enjoyment, and so I still gave it a 5 stars. But the longer I've had to sit on it and the longer I've had to think about everything that I'm not a huge fan of, I've decided that it's only a 4-star book. I know that it might be hard for some of you to hear this. I don't know. It just let me down in a lot of different areas. It was really, really anticlimactic, and if you want like my spoilery thoughts, you can watch my video for this book. But this is like probably my least favorite Shadowhunter book that I've read. Maybe that's not true. Most of the books by her that I've read are 5-star books, but like this was just not that great. I expected it because it was the finale to be like really great and for me to love it a lot. But it was only like a 4-star. And again, all my thoughts on this book and all the things I didn't like are like really spoilery, so I'm not gonna detail those here, but you can watch my video if you wanna know the spoilers. But it's still on the upper half of the list, so I don't like hate this book, but this was probably like not my favorite Shadowhunter book. Cassandra Clare definitely let me down, which is like the first time she's ever like genuinely let me down. I wish I could reread it, but what the frick? Why is it so big? Moving on. We're moving into the top 2 books of the year. Who's ready to find out what they are? I feel like y'all probably know what they are because I haven't talked about them yet. But this next book, I never planned on buying it, but it surprised me so much. I have read it so many times and it inspired me a lot and was just so beautiful to read. And that was Useless Magic by Florence Welch. If you don't know, Florence is my girl. I love her so much. Her music is some of my favorite music. She inspires me so much with like my own writing and my own art and stuff like that. I say art as if like I'm a painter. I'm not. I just write sucky books that no one has ever read. But if you don't know, this book is just a collection of like the lyrics from her songs along with like cool pictures and like art she did. Like it's just like a really, really cool bind up. And I feel like if you are a fan, it would be a bad decision not to pick this up. And speaking of bad decisions, I did get a tattoo. I just love making terrible, terrible decisions without really thinking about it. Moving on. My favorite book of the year. I feel like most of you can probably guess what it is at this point because I haven't talked about this book or this book series yet. I just have to say is I did not expect this book series to be #1, mostly because I started this year not being a fan of this series. I read it a couple years ago, like 5 years ago. I thought this series was gonna be one of those series where I go back and I reread them and I'm like, this is trash. And I even made a video where I was like, I'm pretty sure this series is trash, but because I was like 13, I didn't have a problem with it. I reread the whole series and I had such a good time, and now I consider it one of like my favorite series of all time, which is a great feeling. And that is Restore Me, aka the Shatter Me series. She came back to life this year, y'all. She died like in 2014, and then she was gone for a couple years, and then Takamaki was like, hey guys, guess what? I thought y'all seen The Last of Me, but I don't think so. I read this book and it was so enjoyable. I love the characters in this book so much. I love just so much of what this series is about. I'm still waiting for the cover of Defy Me. I think it's gonna be purple. What are your thoughts? Let me know. Literally nobody else cares about this series. There's like 5 people that survived like the Dark War. You know how in the latest Star Wars movie like everybody dies and there's like 10 people left in the Revolution or whatever? That's literally the Shatter Me fandom. Like I feel like 5 years ago everybody was a fan, but now in 2018, 2019 there's like 5 of us. Like on Twitter, like I still see memes occasionally, but they're from the same like 3 people where it's like, what happened? And if you were wondering, I am coming for your brand witty novels, but I love this series a lot. I would say it's one of my top 2 or 3, probably not, maybe 4 or 5 favorite series of all time. I had such a fun time reading this book, and I can't wait for the next 2 books. Even though I feel like they might be a little bit underwhelming because Takamaki has basically confirmed that nothing really significant is gonna happen and that every character is gonna survive. You know what? I'm just gonna take it for what it is. So that was all of the books that I read in 2018. If you were wondering, 2018 was a dumpster fire of a year, top 10 worst years of my life. Also, I just have to say, is my new favorite thing is like saying like top 10 worst moments of my life and then doing a Watch Mojo voice and then going down the list. Like number 10, 2018. I'm gonna make like a detailed list. Maybe in the year 2019, I will like officially just flip the switch and just decide that I'm gonna make top 10 lists. Maybe that's what this channel needs. Insane top 10. The old insane reader can't come to the phone right now. Why? Because he's coming for Watch Mojo's brand. Did I do like that thing like the other booktubers where I'm like, it doesn't look quite as good as when they do it. Like when everybody else posts like this, it's like nice and like cute. But when I do it in my thumbnail, it's like, did he just go to Barnes & Noble, snatch those books up and run? Why does it... These are the books that I read and liked and didn't like in 2018. Make sure to subscribe to my channel because I post videos on Tuesday. Everybody is just out here and they're like, 2019 is my year. I'm gonna make my channel so much better. I'm gonna do so many changes and I'm gonna be the best version of myself. And then I'm just like, I'm just out here making the same crap. Like not even the same crap, like maybe even worse mediocre crap. Subscribe.